The first thing to expect when going into Raiden DX is the sheer level of difficulty that awaits. It's a shooter that is not afraid to challenge you, and at times your screen will be a constant blur of neon green and pink as you try your chances against the onslaught of enemies that are constantly thrown your way. Of course, there are several mechanics in play that help alleviate this threat, one being the several types of weapons that you have at your disposal, the most important being the laser that can at times engulf the entire screen and is sure to help you out in tight spots. On top of this, you have access to bombs and of course a standard weapon and several items that improve your chances. One standout aspect of Raiden DX though has to be the boss fights that occupy the end of each stage. Each of them runs on a timer which manages to amp up the urgency, resulting in some of the most frantic and engaging parts of the game. If you're at all a fan of shooters, Raiden DX is sure to satisfy your needs, but be warned, it is not for the faint of heart. Star Gladiator is a weapons-based fighter that shares much in common with the likes of Soul Blade. Although it never quite reaches the heights of its clear inspiration, it's still a solid and engaging fighter. Naturally, a wide selection of characters are included that all bring with them unique weapons as well as stories that make playing through as each absolutely essential to seeing everything the game has to offer. Once in battle, each fight takes place on a huge variety of impressive arenas, with two main ways in which to defeat your opponent, one being simply to deplete their life gauge, with the other being to knock them out of the ring. Now a slew of basic attacks are afforded to each fighter, as well as special moves known as plasma combos. Chaining these together can result in an ultimate attack that inflicts devastating amounts of damage on the enemy. Some of them are pretty amusing to pull off as well. Although it's not the best fighter on the system by any means, it's still one that deserves a look. Whilst there isn't anything really outstanding about Dragon Valor's storyline, there isn't anything especially wrong with it. You start off as Clovis, a young man who has just returned home to his village to find it burning down and seeing his sister die before his very eyes. This prompts him to set out and slay the ones responsible. Gameplay wise, it's essentially an action game with a few RPG elements and several puzzles thrown in. The controls are simple and responsive, however using certain combinations you can use quite a wide variety of moves, and in addition to that, as you progress through the game you learn various magic spells as well, all of which can be upgraded to a certain level depending on what path you take. Naturally, a ton of items and equipment can be bought or found throughout the adventure, and instead of forcing you to fight enemies to improve yourself, you collect these items from simple chalices, scrolls, gems, but also special items such as pendants, bracelets and the like, most of which can be quite challenging to acquire. They all improve stats like defense and various others that help you become more proficient within the world. Overall, while it's nowhere near perfect, the aspects that are more than make up for it and provide an entertaining game, one which anyone can pick up and put down at ease. Before going on to create what is arguably the most defining racing game of all time, Gran Turismo, game designer Yamauchi worked on a very different kind of racing game. Motortoon Grand Prix shares many similarities with Mario Kart and presents itself as an item-based racer that often gets overshadowed by other games of the same nature. The first thing to get out of the way is the handling of each car. It takes a bit of time to get used to it as it can be quite heavy. Generally it's responsive enough, but the way that the car slides does take a little getting used to, and because it plays a large part in the game, it's essential to master, but after some time the issue soon disappears. Now there's several characters to choose from that each possess their own car and lovable personality that adds a real sense of charm to the game. As you would expect, a ton of tracks make the cut as well, which are all meticulously designed, and by completing the game you can eventually unlock more new power-ups, cars and tracks that help the overall replay value shine. If you're looking for a fun pick up and play racer on the PS1, Motortoon Grand Prix is well worth checking out. Evil Zone is quite possibly one of the most underrated fighters on the PS1. It may not be to everyone's liking, but the simple and stripped down approach to its gameplay is what really helps it excel. There's only two buttons, attack and block. That's all you have to use, just triangle and square, as well as any directional button that alone gives you more than enough attacks to pound your opponent into oblivion. and the distance between you and your opponents adds even more variety to the attacks. It's a really unique setup that helps Evil Zone stand out amongst the huge range of fighters on the console. Although the general narrative doesn't appear to have much substance, it's the individual stories of each character that are really interesting. Their stories play out like a 10-episode anime series, complete with episode previews and title screens that adds a real flair to the presentation. On top of this, there are several modes in which to play. From your standard arcade to survival and multiplayer, there's a generous amount of things to do. If you're a fan of the genre and are looking for something new to play on the PS1, Evil Zone is truly worth a go. The PS1 is no stranger to incredible platformers. With the likes of Rayman and Crash Bandicoot, there is plenty to choose from. But one that not many players know about is Silhouette Mirage. It's another 2D side-scroller from fan favourite Treasure that sees you filling the role of Shinna as you set out on a mission to restore the planet to its former glory. Surprisingly, the narrative soon becomes one of the better aspects of the game, with a ton of humour and charm that help it excel. But ultimately, the gameplay is what cements it as something unforgettable. It sees you progressing through levels that consist of avoiding obstacles, jumping from platform to platform, running from hazards, all whilst fighting enemies with one of the following elements: normal, silhouette or mirage. To defeat silhouette enemies you use the mirage shot, and to defeat mirage ones you have to use the silhouette one. To defeat normal you have to deflect the blast of the enemy by using either the silhouette or mirage shield. It all sounds quite confusing at first, but once you actually play, it soon becomes second nature. And complementing all of this is the economy system that sees enemies dropping money that can in turn be spent on purchasing health and special weapons that really come into play during some of the more trickier boss fights that soon become one of the best parts of the game. Although it's not a perfect platformer, Silhouette Mirage more than deserves a playthrough and is bound to resonate with fans of the genre. Pop and Pop is a puzzle game that incorporates many different characters from Taito's back catalogue. It shares much in common with the likes of Bubble Bobble and Arkanoid by taking many of the mechanics that comprise their gameplay and mixing them together to create something new. The main objective of the game is to match 3 or more of the same colour balloons as they slowly drop down from the screen. As you would expect, the more that you chain together nets you a higher amount of points, and when coupling this with the limited time that you're given on each stage, it soon becomes a frantic race against the clock. In order to advance to the next stage, every balloon on the screen must be cleared. Naturally, the level of difficulty increases the more that you progress through each and every stage, which all make up several worlds. At the end of a world, you'll usually encounter a boss, and this is where the gameplay really starts to heat up. Now visually, Pop and Pop is a rather simple affair, but the sprites and general vibrancy of the on-screen action really help sell the overall playful nature of the experience. If you're a fan of puzzle games and have exhausted some of the other offerings on the system, Pop and Pop is well worth a go. 1 is a highly intense action shooter that sees players taking on the role of a man known as John Kane. You find yourself waking up with no memory of your past life, with your arm encased in a strange device. More than that, you find that you feel almost nothing, except for one emotion: raw, absolute rage. This emotion actually becomes center to the overall adventure, as it ties in with the amount of life and power that you possess. The more enemies and objects that you blow up, the stronger your cannon gets, and the more your life increases. When you get hit, your life goes down, and so does your attack power. This means that as you advance and make more kills, assuming you avoid getting hit in return, your power and the pace of the game increase until it reaches a fever pitch adrenaline rush. There are no real breaks in the action either, as enemies wait around every turn, and turning back along your path brings back the ones you've already killed. Now you have a fair amount of variety to your attacks as well. Aside from your arm cannon, you can attack physically close up, and when you build your rage meter to its maximum, you can unleash a smart bomb that destroys everything on the screen. On top of this, you can find secret weapons like a flamethrower or homing missiles that enhance your firepower for a short time. Once you've made it through the game, consecutive plays progress much quicker. It's fun to replay and explore the different difficulty settings, and it's one of those games you'll find yourself going back to time and time again. The PS1 was home to a wide range of unique experiences. One that has constantly stood out to me is VibRibbon. It sees the player taking up the role of a rabbit named Vibri, who must be guided past a string of obstacles as she makes her way across the ribbon. These are tied to 4 buttons on the controller, with L, down, R and X corresponding to a block, pit, looping and wave. The idea is that when she runs into one, the correct button must be pressed. It may sound simple enough, but soon complications pop up in the shape of obstacles that have merged together. For example, a block combined with a wave forms a set of elevated spikes and requires the player to press both L and X at the same time. Now whenever something goes wrong and Vibri skips into an obstacle, her lines begin to squiggle, and after getting hit too many times she'll eventually change shape. If this happens too many times, it's game over. Clearing the obstacles, on the other hand, will add a dot to a circle, and when it's complete the rabbit will evolve into Super Vibri, which will boost the amount of points that you earn. Chasing a high score really is the goal of Vibribbon. Transforming Vibri into her super form, keeping her in that state and racking in the points really is quite addictive. So if you're looking for something highly unique on the PS1, Vibribbon has got you covered. A huge selection of fighting games found their way to the PS1, from Mortal Kombat to Street Fighter and more obscure offerings like Bloody Roar, but one that often gets overlooked is Rival Schools. This game is an absolute blast to play. There's around 30 odd characters in the game, which each offer enough variety to make the game enjoyable regardless of who you choose. Anyone who has played Street Fighter before will be right at home, and anyone who hasn't can assign all of the difficult tasks such as throwing 100 fireballs to one button. It helps make Rival Schools a really accessible experience. Now what makes it stand out is the inclusion of teams. You get to choose 2 characters, but the actual fights are one-on-one, with your partner only participating by being called in when a player has enough vigor for a team-up attack. These attacks light up the screen in style and deal some heavy damage once carried out. But just as important as going on the offensive is, several defensive techniques are included as well, such as counters and cancels that can help turn the tide of each encounter. With a cast of lovable characters, an engrossing story and intuitive gameplay, Rival Schools is a game that will not disappoint. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow me on all of the socials to stay up to date on future videos and to take part in giveaways. You can also join our growing community on Discord and meet many like-minded gamers to continue the conversation with. I'd also like to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters Rhino, Skill Jim, Nano, Steve and Paddy J for their continued support that helps make these videos possible. If you're interested in joining our Discord or supporting the channel through Patreon, you'll find the links in the description. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch the video. I will catch you next time.